Welcome to Safety Justice League.
The next time I have to come in here, I'm cracking skulls.
Beef jerky out, his black coffee in his hand, and he is interviewing a nobody.
Oh my gosh. Don't.
We're sending you back to the future.
NSFW.
I'm your number one fan.
Get my mental druthers ready here.
You need to do that red leather, yellow leather.
What is that, like a tongue exercise?
Unique New York. Unique New York.
There you go.
Watermelon. Any monkey business is ill-advised.
All right, let's get this started. Mute your people.
Mute.
Okay, now I'm gonna want to swear. I won't swear.
We're on a mission from God.
What one question though? Can Redbeard's beard actually like do some superpower stuff? I mean, that thing is getting big.
You can't handle the truth.
Hey, it's Abby Ferri with another episode of Safety Justice League Presents with Abby Ferri. And I'm super excited for today's episode because it's like a reconnection with somebody that I used to spend almost every hour of every day with during our master's degree program in environmental health and safety. So today I'm chatting with Rebecca Andersen, and she is the Director of Career Services and Alumni Relations at UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Information, which we're going to learn more about all of this because in the spirit of our superhero theme podcast, I'm going to ask Rebecca for her origin story because that job title, it has something to do with safety, but on the surface, I need to know more. So Rebecca, welcome to the podcast. Why don't you tell everybody about yourself?
Yeah, hi, thanks. I'm super glad to be here and kind of reconnect with the EH&S world because it's been a while. My origin story and how I got here, I went through the master's program at UMD, University of Minnesota Duluth, and I decided to do that program at a very young age, actually, because I had an aunt in the safety business at Intel. It was a really growing time for EH&S, and it looked just like a really cool profession, doing good work, helping people. So throughout my undergrad, I was really oriented toward doing EH&S. And after that program, I was recruited to come out and work in California for the Xerox PARC Research Center. And while I loved my role, I particularly liked working with people and doing training. That was the biggest piece of it for me, was behavior change. In fact, like my research project in graduate school was around behavioral-based safety. So I always really liked that instructional design and working with people. And I just started slowly moving my career in that direction. So I was in EH&S as a safety manager for probably about 5 years. Then I came to UC Berkeley to do environmental work and really focus on environmental protection and sustainability, because I saw that was an area where we really needed to do a lot of large scale instruction and learning and growth, not just with the folks that were working in the field, but also just all individuals everywhere needed to understand sustainability and how important it was to our planet. So I got to get much in the weeds with air quality and water quality. I like to tell folks that I probably know more about sanitary sewers than anybody else in the room, usually at least the rooms that I'm in, because I crafted our school's first sanitary sewer management plan and talked about sanitary sewer overflows and all of that kind of stuff. But again, throughout all of that work, I was most interested in the professional development side and really working with people and diverse groups of people. So from there, I just started to build a lot of skills in facilitation, employee engagement, organizational development. And before I know it, I was kind of seen as a person in that space, which led me to then work in employee engagement at UC Berkeley. And then from there, it was a short leap to working in career development with students, because through all this whole journey, what I kind of realized was that there's no one answer to what we should be when we grow up. There's no one answer to how we should live our lives or how we should find happiness, but instead we kind of build it as we grow, and it takes you in a lot of different directions. So instead of career anxiety, there's really career exploration. And I wanted to help other people with that, because that can be hard. And of course, I think one of the loves I've had throughout this is working in technology, working with technical audiences. I think that's one of the things that really drew me to safety in the first place, was just that you get to work with a lot of technical folks. So I remained with that. And now I manage a team of career advisors at the School of Information at UC Berkeley, which for a name that has information in the title, people often don't know who we are. But the School of Information is all about how information is transmitted and used and distributed around the world. So data science, privacy, cybersecurity, how your applications like your Facebook app are designed on your phone, how your browser is designed, how technology and information is built and distributed. So now I work with students in that space to help find their career paths and to kind of do that exploration and not be married to one thing, but be really open to a lot of changes throughout their lives. I've added on the alumni relations part recently, which is kind of just an extension again. It's working with alumni now on their careers and staying involved and staying included, and giving back to the school. So it's been a kind of a strange journey, but there is some common themes and threads in there as well.
And it's awesome. I think I'm just frantically writing a bunch of notes like, oh, we should talk about this. And we probably won't get to everything that I selfishly would want to talk about with you, but we can talk offline, as they say.
Yes.
I can definitely, I can definitely identify with that career anxiety. And I love how you framed it as the career exploration, because I feel, and we were probably the youngest people in the MEHS program. So I definitely identify with that, because I felt like even at that time when we were in a master's level program, that I still was kind of like, I don't know what I really want to do with this. So I get that. And at that time, and also even like middle school and high school leading up to that, we were being told by guidance counselors that we would change our career, like our actual career, what was it, 5 times in our life?
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about all the stress of identifying a major and then going into this master's program and trying to figure out, well, what industry am I going to work in? I don't think I really had anxiety where I was freaking out about it, but it was a general kind of scatterbrainness of, okay, I don't know, like, we'll see. I'm doing safety, and then I'm just going to go with that. And I feel like safety is one of those career paths where you can take a lot of these different detours. You can satisfy different parts of your interest and personality and what you want to pursue professionally by dipping in and out of different industries. And I've been able to do that by leaving companies and going to other pathways like site construction. And I know a lot about wastewater treatment, so maybe we could talk sanitary sewers and water treatment too. um, but then going into insurance, so I've done a little bit of that career path strange journey as well. But I started writing some notes about the behavior change, like that first part of your career, and going back to even the master's program. And you mentioned something that those of us in the Safety Justice League often talk about, which is behavior-based safety. So what is your take on that? It feels like it's kind of fallen out of fashion. And I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah. I mean, back in, was it 2002, 2003, when I was doing, I got like a grant to do some research on behavioral-based safety. And even back then, I feel like behavior-based safety was out of fashion. So it's
Interesting.
just kind of like remained. It flares up and it goes out. But for me, we have systems that are built that can be systems that are set up to promote or detract from safety, from environmental protection, or you could even say like from oppression or privilege. You can take this in many different directions, but those systems at the end of the day are built by people and are maintained by people. And so, from my perspective, if we want to have change, if we want to have a certain kind of outcome, then it all comes down to how we act. Not what we say, not what the intent was, but what is our behavior? And I had a really pivotal moment. Trying to think of when it was, but it was at least 10 years ago. It was when I was still working in the environmental space. And I was working with some plumbers. And I was trying to get them to do this record keeping for our emergency generators. And if anyone's worked in the environmental field, it's a lot about record keeping. So there was this records they needed to keep, and they weren't really used for much other than to just show the air quality district and the water district that we were doing the right thing. So the plumbers just would not do this record keeping. I would tell them all this information about how it's important. I created these online forms that they could use. It was so easy in my mind, and they just wouldn't do it. And before you know it, I built this story in my head of, these people do not respect me. They don't understand. They, think a woman shouldn't be in charge. I don't look like the right person that should be doing this. And I built this whole impression in my mind. But at the end of the day, people do the behaviors that make sense for their world and that they know. And the fact that these plumbers were not doing this record keeping had absolutely nothing to do with me. What it was is that I was trying to get them to do something online in a form when they don't have computers in the field. I was trying to get them to turn something in paper when they don't. That causes them to go out of their way. As soon as we could have an actual conversation about where they were and what they needed, instead of me making assumptions and like building this ladder of inference in my mind, as soon as we had that conversation, we could both understand each other a lot more, both get rid of those misconceptions, and then promote the right kind of behavior. Because now I'm not giving a solution, I'm not setting up a system that doesn't make sense, but I'm engaging somebody in the process and I'm doing the exploration with them. And that was a real turning point for me in seeing how behaviors are built, how our systems can be built so that they're not useful, they're not helpful, and how really the systems can promote certain type of activities and behavior. That system that I had built actually promoted the plumber from not doing the thing I was asking them to do.
I love that realization. And I think I had a very simplified version of that where I think other people, other safety professionals at the time were just telling me, involve the workers, ask them. And so I would do that, have those individual conversations or group conversations just to find out. It's kind of like meeting the workers where they're at. And I think that's always great advice. And I love what you said about, I forget the term you used, something about the inferences that you're making. But it reminds me of something I've heard lately when I listen to this woman's podcast. Her name is Cy Wakeman, and she's a human resources professional. And one of the prompts that she teaches people to use in their work life when they're having stressful moments like this, where people aren't adopting some system they're supposed to do, or they're just not doing something that you want them to do, or that they're supposed to do, that when you start to build up those stories in your head and you start to believe it, that she says you should take a step back and ask yourself, or say to yourself, the story I'm telling myself is. So I love that you reflected on yourself like that. And you were like, I'm telling myself this story that likely isn't even true, but then you're gauging or you're making specific actions off of the story you're telling yourself. And that can be dangerous.
Yes, exactly. It can be dangerous as a safety professional when you're trying to, ensure safety, have people behave in a certain way. As an environmentalist, in that world, there's a lot of like, people don't care about climate change. They don't care about sustainability. Well, if we make it so difficult to have sustainable behaviors, like if our electric car infrastructure isn't there, for example, then we're not promoting the right kind of behavior we're trying to have. And all of that is tied into organizational development and professional development. I think a lot of when I started to get skills in facilitation and organizational development, I would see, this is why that thing I was doing was working. This is why that thing wasn't working. Here's how I can engage people better in meetings. A lot of that stuff, I think in the past, we haven't professionalized. we call them soft skills, and calling them
Yes.
soft skills downplays their importance, downplays that you should just be able to know them. You should just pick them up. And really, there's technique there. Yes, you can be automatically a little good at certain things, but to really hone it is a craft.
You're so right. And I'm just thinking back to, well, one, a funny story from our master's program, which I don't know if you'll even remember this, but I can't remember the class. But anyone that went through the UMD, MEHS, or even way back to the MIS program, if you remember our professor, Bernie, and
Hmm.
it must have been an organizational management type of class. I forget the exact title, but all I remember from the class was meeting facilitation and this crazy video where the analogy was riding the tiger. Do you remember that?
Yes. Yes, I do. Now that you say it, I didn't remember it before.
And like any UMD graduates that are listening to this, I hope they just laugh and smile about it. But I've been in meetings with other UMD grads, and I'll give them that compliment at the end, like, "Wow, you really rode the tiger for that one." So yeah, that I thought of that aside, but I wanted to ask you, like, seriously though, on that topic, um, the soft skills, which I think we could call it something better. You're absolutely right, because soft makes it sound like it's not technical or useful or is purposeful in business. But are there other philosophies or management systems or themes that a safety professional should really cross train in that they likely didn't learn in school and that they're not learning if they attend safety specific types of professional education?
Oh, that is a great question. Um, I mean, I think I was one of the biggest struggles that I had when I started in the safety world was that I was not really set up for how much influencing without authority I was going to have to do. And when you're brand new, and I didn't have a lot of mentorship, um, people are looking to me as the expert, and I had nowhere else to look. um, and I had to manage people right away. And so getting those, like, how do I manage with through influence without authority, or without direct authority. What I mean by that is, like, how do I manage when I'm not actually somebody's supervisor? How do I do that? Getting a mentor is one of the most helpful things you can do, especially somebody who's in your workplace, because then they can point out this thing you're doing right here could be more effective if you change it in this way.
Hmm.
So that was really helpful when I started to get some mentorship and some guidance from a lot of folks that I trusted. And I didn't even really realize, I think, that I was getting that mentorship until I did.
Right.
Because it's hard to see your blind spots. I mean, if we could see our blind spots, they wouldn't be called blind spots. Um,
Exactly. Yeah, the whole responsibility without authority, I feel that that's a problem that nearly every safety professional is going to face at some point in their career, where we are not the person that the frontline workers or the craft people that I would work with in construction, the safety person is not the person that's giving them their orders for the day. We're not directly running the work. And so being able to influence, and especially right out of school, and especially, sorry, as young
yes,
women, that
yes,
was tough. There was a lot stacked against us. And then like for me personally, I noticed in my field that I felt I actually had it easier than a young man coming out of the same situation academically that I had. I felt that um, the workers' biases or stereotypes of me were that I knew nothing. So really, I had nothing to lose because they thought I didn't know
mm,
anything anyway. And so I could ask questions of the workers and be there side by side with them and ask them, why are you doing that? What is that tool? Why do you do it that way? And I feel that a young man back then, fresh out of school, if they would have asked questions like that, I feel it would have hurt their credibility.
yeah, I think you're right. That can definitely happen, and it's hard to ask questions. And when you're, no matter what degree you get and what your journey is into safety, like, you're coming into a space where you have to respect. And this took me a while to learn. You have to respect that the individuals working in that space are more have more expertise in that space than you do. I mean, I knew that intuitively, but I was afraid to show it because I thought it would make me look weak. But actually asking all those questions, showing all of that interest can make you look much stronger because you're showing that respect and you're paying that attention. I had to realize that as a woman, and also just as a person, like as somebody who has my personality, I like to wear high heeled shoes. I like to be a certain way. I was never going to relate to, let's say a plumber again by talking about the tools I had at home, like my
Right.
colleagues did. That wasn't going to happen.
Nope.
um, I don't know different tools. So I had to find a different way to relate. And like once I got there, my work was so much easier because I had such a better relationship. But, when you start out, I think for me, I was so nervous about putting out the wrong impression and giving people the impression that I didn't know what I was doing, that I was afraid to show that vulnerability in a way. But actually, that vulnerability is super important.
I agree. I feel like I learned all that stuff after the fact. Like I look back on
Yeah.
my first job and I'm like, oh, I did some stuff the right way, just accidentally or just intuitively. And things turned out okay. And I think there's a combination of some stuff that you just have to learn on that first job. I felt a lot of connections being made from the course material. And I know that having a master's in safety is sometimes a ding against you when you come out into the field, especially in some workspaces like in construction. But I really felt that as I listened and observed the workers and got some more experience and time in the position, that a lot of things started to make more sense. And then I started to build on that. So I wish I could go back and maybe get a more official mentor situation because maybe I could have moved the needle quicker on some things. But, you look back and it's like, well, what can you do? What happened happened, and we can only learn from it and maybe mentor others. So
Yeah.
I'm really curious about this whole career services thing and especially the alumni relations, because I'm wondering, what I see in safety is that people are in this constant battle of trying to not get burned out. Safety
Hmm.
can be kind of a tough position, and I think that sometimes people end up exiting the profession because of that, or, taking a detour and maybe coming back. So I'm just curious about how, if that comes up in the alumni and students that you serve, and also how you would approach that for a safety professional.
Yeah, I I do think that part of me kind of making a pivot was, there was a lot of late night calls. The lifestyle was a little tricky at times. If I could go back, I would try to build a stronger team so that it wasn't so much on one person all the time, or, even it was on different individuals at different points, but rather spreading the load a little bit more. I think having those like mentors and connections and community makes it really helpful when you're having to make tough calls. And now in my work now, it's so different. I often think about how, one way to tell my story is, wow, I'm wildly unqualified for what I do right now because I work in career services that has nothing to do with safety anymore. I'm not using my degree at all. But on the other hand, this degree got me where I needed to be. And it makes me relate to my audiences because they're all in tech and I have a technical background and I worked in tech. So we have a point of connection instead of it being like a point of disconnection.
Definitely.
And in technology, the work is super fast paced. Um, there's high standards, high rewards sometimes. And what I try to remind folks is like, we don't have to define success the way that society might say you have to define success. Success does not need to be how many widgets did you produce? Did you get this thing out time? Did you make a certain amount of money? Success can be more tied to your personal values and what you're trying to achieve with your life. And that can be really unique. And I cannot judge what somebody else defines as success. It has to be judgment free because I don't know somebody's story. I don't know their background. I don't know what's important to them, where they've come from. Um, so I think that's an important thing. In my philosophy now, I use design thinking. And design thinking is an iterative approach where, in an engineering thinking, we kind of know what the right solution is. We need to build this bridge. We know the safest way, the most cost efficient way to build this bridge. In design thinking, we take problems like your life. There is no one right answer for your life. So we can't make an ROI spreadsheet. We can't do a pros and cons. We can't say, like, should I take this degree or not? Instead, we have to look at where we are today, what are our interests at this moment, and we have to build our way forward and then check. And a lot of it relates back to, like, was it Six Sigma or lean
Yeah.
management when you're doing the plan, check, and do. So it's super related. It's just another iteration of that.
Okay, because at first I was getting a little anxious because of when you said no spreadsheets, no pros and cons list. And I'm like, oh my gosh, am I an engineer thinking person? I never thought of myself that way. And maybe the plan, do, check, act. I think a lot of us use that tool for our work, but I guess I never really thought about that applying it to my personal career or just even life. And so that's design thinking. Where can we learn more about that?
Yeah, design thinking, it's become a big movement. There is a website, designyourlife.com, I think it is, and there's a book called Design Your Life. It came out of the design lab at Stanford and these two faculty members there that actually taught a class for undergraduate and grad students, and now have taken it to the workplace. And there's a new book, I think it's called Design Your Work Life, actually. But I think a lot of the free resources online are great on this topic. It's really changed how I approach my work. Being in Silicon Valley and working at a nonprofit educational institution, if I define my life by how much money I make, wow, would I be losing?
Right?
um, and recently I decided to go back and get my doctorate degree in education. Like, what am I going to do with that? That's not going to make me more money. But that's not how I'm defining my life. I still make spreadsheets, I still have pros and cons and things. But then when I look at that, it's kind of like when you're choosing where to live. And if you've ever gone through the house buying process, sometimes you look at a house and you're like, wow, this house is everything to me on paper, but I hate it.
And
Home
why do I
buying
hate
is
it?
yeah, it's an
Yeah.
emotional decision, and your life is an emotional decision as well. Sometimes, you want what you want. Um, and I never like answer the question now, what are you going to be in 5 years? Where do you see your life in 5 years? Because I have no idea. What role am I going to have? I don't know. But I do know I'm going to be doing these certain values. I'm going to be furthering this mission that I'm really interested in. I'm going to be learning more about this particular topic. What that looks like, it can take a different path. I would never say no to an opportunity if it aligns with my value and like my mission statement for my life.
That's really interesting because I know safety people spend a lot of time working within, I guess, the confines of their company's mission, vision, purpose, values, and all
Yes.
those statements. And so I think a lot of us, myself included at times, find it hard to maintain your own personal identity within your career, within your organization. And so this could be a really good tool for people to just kind of reground themselves on, who am I? What am I looking for in this profession? I think I like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
I think part of the reason a lot of folks get into environmental health and safety is because they have varied interests and they like doing a lot of different things and they don't want their days to be the same. And when that's the case and you don't have this one thing that's your passion, it can be hard.
Yeah.
um,
I
it's not like,
identify with that. I remember
yes,
back in our master's program, I was like,
exactly.
I just want to work outside and not be in an office every day. And so that could have been multiple settings. So you're speaking right to me, Rebecca.
Yeah, and you can feel like, "Oh, shouldn't I have this one thing that I wanna do? Shouldn't I climb this one ladder?" But, you know, I've reframed the idea of passions because that word is just so weighty, into interests. Like, what are you interested about now, today? What do you wanna study at this moment? And that can change. So, if you're like, I, I really like toxicology. I think that's a field that's really interesting to me. It was always some of my favorite coursework and some of the favorite things I did back in the day. And if I followed that path and then I decided, oh, now I'm getting interested in environmental work, it's just additive. It's not subtractive to what you're doing.
That's a really good point. And I think a lot of safety professionals too, that passion word, it can be limiting. You're absolutely correct. And I think there's like a whole other conversation on the side too about safety as a career path, that it's not like this calling or passion. And if you don't feel super excited about safety every single day, that like that could still be okay.
Oh, that's completely
And
okay.
the whole like priorities and values conversation too, that with the language used around safety purpose statements or safety messages you put out there, that people think that, well, priorities change. So if you say safety is our number one priority, that some people are beating themselves up if their company says that, but that's okay too. There's all this different language around how we look at these things, and I think that it doesn't help us. It just
No,
makes things a little bit more difficult.
and it's hard, in the regulatory world, things can be very black and white. But once you've been in that world for a while, I think, at least all the places I've been, it's all shades of gray. And we can say safety is the number one priority or your environment is the number one priority, and at the same time make choices that are different. And both things can be true. And that's really, really hard. Um, that's a hard thing to understand, how we can say people first, but then we're making this different choice, because things are complicated. There's always a lot of different factors. You might decide to take a risk in this one area, and I'm talking environmental wise now because that's more of the area I was in. We might take a slight risk, um, with I don't know, what do you call it? A sanitary sewer. We're not going to replace this one sewer line yet. We're going to wait a little bit, even though we know it's risky, even though we might know it might be a problem, because if we replaced it now, it might have these other effects, these other environmental effects, these other safety effects, these other people effects. There's never just like one, or I shouldn't say never, but it's rarely is there one right way, one right solution. There's
Oh,
definitely
absolutely.
sometimes, wear safety glasses, things like that.
Right.
But there's a lot of other times where it's very complicated.
Yeah, people are complicated though. That's the
Yes,
problem, and that's the opportunity for sure.
people are complicated and people built systems.
Exactly. Yeah, so there we go. That brings it all back. I wanted to wrap up because I feel like we might get off on a different tangent, and then this could be an hour and a half. But I wanted to give you the last word on just thinking about back on your career, and I think the both of us were in about the middle-ish stages of our careers, and there's a lot of people listening to this podcast that find themselves in the same demographic.
Mhm.
And so you have an opportunity to speak to them. And what would be like your top piece of advice for someone right now? Because they might be in that middle part of their career, might be feeling discouraged about things. What would you advise them to do to maybe renew some of that passion or spark for safety?
Yeah, I would say maybe a couple things. First one is, um, give yourself some empathy and grace. Like, you are here. You can't go back. Your story might have had zigs and zags, or maybe you're not at the place you wanted to go to, but like, you made it here. This is your life. You built it, and you got to this place, which is a good place. Like, all the good and the bad is part of your story and is a lesson learned. And then moving forward, I would say, um, there can be a lot of different reasons to be in the field. We don't all have to have the same reasons. Don't judge yourself by somebody else's motivation or somebody else's success. I always say other people's success does not diminish mine. I can be really happy for other people, and the more gratitude you put out there in the world, the more it kind of comes back. I live by my life by this idea of planned happenstance, that we can make opportunity and chance happen by following our interests, putting out gratitude, and just like putting ourselves out there in general, because a door's open all the time of opportunity. You just have to be standing in the right place. And that just takes moving around and exploring a little bit.
That's epic advice. This is definitely not the direction I thought this podcast would go, but I'm so stoked that we had this conversation because there's a lot of themes in my life and in my acquaintances and cohorts in safety that I think a lot of this content is really going to resonate with people. So I'm really happy that you said yes to being on this podcast.
Yay.
And yeah, thank you so much. And we'll have to catch up offline, like I said, too. And thanks everybody else for listening. We love bringing this content to you as part of the Safety Justice League, whether we're solo or we're in a group together or all four of us together, or we're interviewing people that strike our interest. So we just thank you all for listening, and hit follow, hit like, leave a review, and come back again to listen to what we're talking about. Thanks for listening.
The views expressed on this podcast are solely the opinions of the hosts and their guests, not necessarily their employer, organization, committee, or any other group or individual on this planet or any yet to be discovered containing intelligent life. The podcast is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. Nothing within this recording is intended to be used as legal guidance or representation of any entity. No portion of the podcast may be reproduced without the express written consent of the show's creator, Safety Justice League, LLC. But hey, ask us nicely. We'll probably share.